So I want to talk a little bit about this practice of opening our body, noticing what's going on inside, and accepting what we find. This very simple moment-by-moment practice. And that we could actually start our day with 2 minutes of this before we get to our emails. Right? Before we start with the immediate list of fires to be put out, right? And challenges to be faced. And I'll suggest to you that that's a particular physiology when we start with, oh, I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this. That's actually a different physiology than starting with, here I am. Here I am. So we could do it for 2 minutes in the morning. We could do it for 2 minutes in the evening. And we could stop multiple times a day for just 2 breaths. For just 2 breaths. So in my work, I work with people who range from 10-year-olds with night terrors to professional athletes who are retiring and don't know how to live at home. And CEOs and lawyers and parents and all kinds of different people. And one of the things that I ask them to do when they very first meet me is just to mess around with this practice and see what happens. And just have the experience of stopping repeatedly. Opening, noticing, and accepting what you find. Call it take 2. I needed some cheesy name for it, so. So this idea of having a more mindful or conscious approach to life, what would that look like? And I'm reminded that I will make everything that you see here available to you in PDF form and an online presentation. So if that's of interest to you, I will send that link to Barbara, and then you'll have access. If you like to take notes, I think that's wonderful as well. So this idea that we can simply be aware and accepting of what's going on within us and around us, that we can start from that basis, that that's something that we can actually do. And what I'm going to suggest is actually, that's a pretty amazing evolutionary gift in the animal world, that we have the interoception to actually, that you can tell me what's going on in your stomach. I mean, it's pretty crazy, actually, and pretty singularly unique as far as we know. So what is it correlated with in the research? Well, there's a whole host of things. And I want to be really careful. The reason I use the word correlation is because some of these things are attendant to when we do this, and some of these things may have a causal relationship. But I think to be fair to the research, where it's causal and where it's correlated isn't always entirely clear. And that's still being pulled apart. So we know that when people are a little more mindful of what's going on inside them, they have healthier relationships. They bounce back from setback a little more easily. They can see new and different solutions. They can choose their behavior more reliably, and they can stick with something even when it's uncomfortable. They tend to be more likely to empathize and see when people need help and engage in that helping behavior. It gives us the capacity to manage our stress. It actually seems to be, as we manage our stress, it seems to regulate our immune system, allows our immune system to be a little more robust. There's also connections with cardiovascular health as well, and curiosity and flexibility. I think some of these things we'd like for ourselves. So when I think about human potential, I think about conscious regulation. Again, this ability to actually make choices purposefully based on values and goals and relationships. And at the bottom of this, at the basis, is this idea that we can actually choose where we put our attention. We can choose what we pay attention to. We can notice the physiology of a wandering mind and bring it back. How many of you are thinking of something other than what I'm talking about right now? Yeah, see? And you knew it. That's the amazing thing. Okay, and then this can really support us in emotional regulation, behavioral regulation, and then sort of the cream of the crop, which is interpersonal regulation, that we can have relationships that are really meaningful for both of us and supportive for both of us. So I like to think of this first as this question of, so what's present? What's actually happening right now in this moment? And we'll talk more about what that's made up of. What's most important? What do I value? And we know that there's a level at which we feel what's most important. We sort out values based on feelings and sensations in our body as much as a cognitive approach. And I'm really excited to hear Mark. Is Mark here? Speaking? Okay, great. I'm really excited to hear what he has to say because I think it's going to build really beautifully on this. And what's under my control? Boy, as a leader, how important is this question? What can I actually affect change on? And what's next? Where will I actually put my energy? Right? And then this, which is often overlooked because there's the intention behind our action, but then there's the consequences as well. What happens as a result? And can I weigh my efforts against both? Right? This yes, this was my intention, and this is what actually happened. And this is really an attentional piece. Can I step back and notice that I really would just like to defend my behavior based on intent? And there's also this consequence that may be very different than what I was trying to create. Questions, thoughts, objections, hostility? Anything? Does this make sense? Yeah? Okay. Please, at any moment, jump in with anything that strikes you. Good. So if we think about life, I think about life a lot. I don't know if you do. If we think about life as divided into two basic parts, one is what shows up in life. The weather, people, election results, all kinds of things, they just show up. We cannot make them happen, even if we wanted to. Feelings inside us, things around us. On the other side is what you practice, how you respond, what kind of skills you cultivate, what kind of internal emotions you access. And what I want to suggest, there's a lot of research that's very clear about this, that when our locus of control is external, when we're really looking to what's outside us as a measure of how successful our life is, we tend to be more neurotic. Yeah, no, it's true. Anxiety, depression, and narcissism in the college population have risen 500% since 1938. Think about it for a second. We have moved from this character model of who you are is what you do to this personality model. Who you are is how many Instagram followers you have, what college you get into, what SAT scores you get. So we have actually externalized the locus of control for many of our young people. And what we see attendant to that is a rise in anxiety, depression, and narcissism. So in 2014, there was since 1966, they've been polling freshmen in college, and they asked them about virtues. And they asked them to rank virtues from a list of 25. And for the first time, in 50% of the population, they put in their top 5 image, fame, and wealth. They've been, for a decade, they've been polling tweens, 10 to 12-year-olds, similar kind of thing. And for this year, 2015, in the top 10 for the first time, they had, if my YouTube video goes viral, that's a virtue. I will know I'm a good person.
Which studies?
I'll give you all the, if you want the. Twenge is the woman who's done the research on anxiety, narcissism, and depression, but anything that comes out of my mouth, I'll give you access to if you ask me. And so this idea of having an internal locus of control, I don't know what's going to show up. I don't know what the weather will be like tomorrow. I don't know what the election results will be. I don't know what's going to happen. What will I practice? What will I cultivate? How will I train when that happens? How will I respond? This is actually, one of my missions is to make schools places that encourage students, that keep the locus of control as much as possible with students, instead of solving problems for them, saving them from their discomfort. Parents are crippling kids by diving in to rescue them for their discomfort, and by convincing them that discomfort is something that means that life is going astray. And tomorrow when we talk about resistance and facing resistance, we'll talk about our own relationship to discomfort and how that affects how we interact with others. Okay, so having a human brain, this is what I'm really interested in. I am just infatuated with this idea of behavioral neurobiology, the way in which our neurobiology shapes what we do and the way in which what we do shapes our neurobiology. It's just an absolute, I'm fascinated with it. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And this is a diagram taken from, it's a model taken from something called the Human Connectome Project. And what they're trying to do is map all the different connections in the brain. And they don't have anywhere near enough money, as I'm about to show you. This number, 1 with 89 zeros, this is an octovigillion. That's the name of this number. And this is the number of, estimated number of electrons, protons, and neutrons in the known universe. It's a big number, short of a Google, but big. This number, 1 with 802 zeros, this is between a ducentillion and a tricentillion, and this number is the number of possible paths that information could take through your brain. It is not an overstatement to say that you arguably have the single most complicated item in the universe rests between your ears. And I know, right? Yeah. And, well, you knew that, but yeah. And it came free with birth. It's like the thing in the Cracker Jack box, right? You're just like, yeah, I got a brain. How wonderful. And so I want to show you one of the things the brain is capable of. I'm going to turn off the volume here. This is a short video that was made in 1946, I think. So we'll watch and then discuss. Now, this is what I love about this. When I ask people what's going on here, rarely does someone raise their hand and say, so 3 shapes on a screen moving in erratic patterns, right? No, that's not what our brain does. Your brain is a storyteller, and it is telling stories about everything all the time. And we can so easily confuse the story that our brain is telling with the event that it's telling the story about, and treat them as exactly the same thing. And again, our storytelling capacity is incredible. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And it's not the same as the event that's happening. And there's an important distinction to be made there. So let's play with this a little bit more. These are 2 letters from an alien alphabet. They are Kiki and Boobah. I want you to decide, without discussing with anyone else, which is Kiki and which is Boobah. Do you need more time? No, you don't need more time. Here's the great thing about this. You saw these 10 seconds ago. You now have made a decision about which is which, and now you have reasons. It gets better, and you'd be willing to argue and debate. Watch. How many people, raise your hand if you choose this as Kiki. Sorry, the one on your left. Great. Notice already there's nodding heads, there's shaking heads. Are you crazy? How can that, yeah. And if you say the one on the right is Kiki, raise your hand. Okay, great. Right? We associate it with things from our past, from things that feel familiar to us, and we come up with a reason, and we're doing this all the time. We're doing this all the time. We're assigning meaning based on our past associations. Your brain is an associative meaning-making machine, and then we can confuse the story that we're telling with the reality. So, which one of these is Kiki and which one is Booba? Neither. It's made up, right? But the first time I did this was with a group of surgeons, and I went on to the next, and someone raised their hand and said, wait a minute, which is Kiki and which is Booba? Right? Because we like to be right, and we like to be surrounded by people who share our story. So in life, there's what shows up, there's what you practice, and we can break what shows up further into events and stories. Always what's showing up for us are the things that are happening externally and internally, and the stories we have about them. For example, we may get anxious, and then we have a whole story about whether we should or shouldn't be anxious, whether we're a good person or not for being anxious, all these different, we get angry, and then we have a whole story about whether we should be angry, and whether if we were better people we wouldn't get angry, all these different, it's not just that we have an internal experience, then we have a story about our internal experience. And let me break this down just a little bit further. I need a volunteer. Is someone willing to volunteer? Just really quickly, no one's going to get hurt. Thank you. Well, actually I can't promise that, but no, I'm just... So what I'd like you to do, if you're willing to stand over there, and Christy, let's imagine that you and I know each other, okay? And we're walking past each other in the hallway, and you're going to greet me. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Great, excellent.
Hey.
I know, right? Sorry. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. Thank you. That's it. So let's think about that for a second. What's the event? What actually happened here?
Two people passed each other in the hall.
Two people passed each other in the hall. Anything else?
One greeted the other one.
One greeted the other, and the other
Ignored the first one.
now ignored. That's an interesting thing. Yeah, or didn't see, right? Are these events or are these stories?
I guess it's
Yeah. So what we know for sure is what?
You just didn't see me until everyone went, "Aw."
Yeah, yeah, so we have a story that he didn't see me or, whatever. But what we actually know is one person passed another, one person said something, the other person didn't. Now, Christy had a story instantly, right? Oh, he didn't see me. Oh, but then people said, so what does that mean, right? And so let's imagine now that I'm Christy, right? And I've just been, I haven't been said hello to. So now I go and I find someone, I say, so I walked by Dave. I said hello, right? He said nothing. I think he's kind of a jerk. What do you think?
again.
Yeah, right? I've found my people, right? But if I come to you and I say, I think he's a jerk, and you say, well, actually, I think you don't maybe understand, Dave's I'm like, okay, whatever. So, and I'm going to hunt down my people. I'm going to find my tribe. I'm going to find the people who share my story, right? And I'm going to keep going. You've experienced this in your faculties, among your student bodies, right? If I really wanted to know what was actually going on, who is the one person I would talk to? Dave. You'd go to Dave, right? Christy would come to Dave, and Christy would say, Dave, I walked by you today. I said, hello. You didn't say anything back. And I might say, I don't like you, right? Or who knows? Or I might say, you did? I didn't even see you, right? If we really wanted to know, then we would go directly to the person who could help us out. But to understand that human beings are inclined to seek out people who share the same story. We want to belong. This is really powerful to understand the difference between events and stories and see how drawn we are. And boy, are we seeing it right now in the United States, are we not? Because if you believe that you see the world the way the world is, there's only one plausible explanation for people who see it differently. They're wrong. It's so patently obvious. But if you understand that you see a subjective experience that is created for you by your brain, and we could go deeply into this, but I will tell you this much. Your brain is a dark place. There's no light in there. There's no sound, there's no taste, there's no smell, there's no touch. All of your sensory organs simply translate the world into electricity That's the only language your brain speaks. And from the electricity that swirls around in there, this. Everyone's got a subjective experience of the world. We know that biologically, not just philosophically. And then we spend our time seeking out people who create a world close enough and avoiding people who see it differently. So the other thing that I think it's really important to understand is that you can't have one of these. You can't have one of these without feeling discomfort. And we live in a culture that abhors discomfort. Really. We are 5% of the world's population, and we use 80% of the world's opiates. Prescription painkillers. Yeah, 1,600% more than the next country in terms of use. Think about that. It's amazing. The shadow side of capitalism is, if you're not comfortable, then buy the new comfortable thing. Or get thinner, or taller, or tighter, or whatever it is. Right? And we've got this real aversion to discomfort. And what I would suggest is, I haven't found anyone who's figured out the way not to have discomfort in their life. And no one dies of discomfort, but lots of people die trying not to have it. Okay, so where does discomfort come from? Well, it comes from this. Now, what I'm about to show you is irresponsible from a neuroscience standpoint, but we don't have a semester. So I'm going to put big shapes on a brain and say this is where it happens, which isn't true. but it's a helpful metaphor. Okay, so if we think about this center of our brain, this old animal part of the brain, famously known as the limbic system, this is the area of the brain that tells us to approach or avoid. This is the area of the brain that tells us to mate with it, kill it, eat it, or run away from it. Right? It's also the part of the brain that stores habitual behavior loops in the basal ganglia. So this is the area of the brain that's strongly associated with survival. It's right now very active. It is searching the room for problems. And if I yelled loudly, which I won't do because you're going to eat later, but if I just went, ha, like that, see? Sorry. But see, instantly her body was ready. It had been scanning for danger the whole time, and her large muscles in her chest and across her shoulders were ready to protect. And that's what life is like for us, right? Hey, Barbara, could you get that email to me yesterday, please? Oh, and by the way, I need the list of people who are coming tomorrow for the, and we're like, slowly over the course of the day. That's one of the reasons that I suggest that we can knowingly and consciously open our body posture from time to time, because this is bound to happen because we're biological creatures. It is thinking about what's urgent, right? And it runs the life of a squirrel. This is your squirrel brain. A squirrel has no choice. It feels something, it does something. It feels something, it avoids something. It doesn't have any other governor for choice. Boom, boom. This area of the brain, famously known as the prefrontal cortex, and it's actually way more complicated, includes a striatum and a variety of other things. This area of the brain is much more about growth, about exploration, about opportunities and possibilities. And it thinks in terms of values, what's important. And it's what makes miracles like this possible. And truly, this, right? I mean, think about this for a second. This is a young woman who says, the most important thing to me isn't my education or the girls that I know. It's the education of all girls, most of whom I will never meet. And then Taliban soldiers walk onto her bus and they shoot her, and she has a metal plate in her head, and part of her face is paralyzed, and when she wakes up in the hospital, she says the most important thing is the education of girls. And think about that. A squirrel cannot do that. That is a specifically human capacity to say, in the face of threat and discomfort, I will stand for something that really matters. We can do that. I heard her speak recently, and it was really amazing because two things that Malala said. One is, she said, can I tell you the hardest thing that I've ever faced? And everyone's like, well, I think we know. She said, my faculty gets together every year and they choose the head girl. They choose the girl who's going to be the sort of the role model for the student body. And they didn't choose me. She said, that's the hardest thing I've experienced. that social rejection. So that's what's possible for human beings. We can get shot in the head and say, but the hardest thing was when we weren't chosen by the faculty. The second thing she said that just killed me, she said, and I'm really stressed about college. I'm in the college application process, and I'm really, right? And I'm thinking, who's the college admission officer? Not Malala, not this year. I don't think she can, yeah. So this part of your brain is always pushing you to resolve discomfort toward comfort, and usually by doing something habitual. And this part of the brain can rest in discomfort and ask questions about purpose and options and choices. And when we do this and accept what's going on inside us, we actually move a little bit of resource out of the survival part of our brain and actually access some of the areas in our brain that can make choices. Now, it's not helpful when someone says to you, when you're upset and someone says, hey, take a breath, right? That's, you know, or don't be. When you're upset and so you're angry and someone says, oh, don't be. That's really helpful, right? Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Thank you. I just won't be. But if you've practiced, then you have a place that you go. But what we know from the research is if I came to you and said, I'm anxious, and you said to me, oh, here's a way not to be, then, and take 3 quick breaths, then what will happen to my anxiety? My anxiety rises and my performance goes down. But if you say to me, well, that's normal, people get anxious before they're challenged, then what happens is anxiety starts to resolve and performance goes up. So the first step is acceptance of what you're experiencing. And the pseudo-acceptance is, if I breathe, it'll go away. That's not acceptance, right? Acceptance is, here it is. Tight chest, full throat, sweaty palms. What are my options? So it's really helpful to know that your brain can paint anything as either a problem or an opportunity. I was working with a young man who was 37 years old, very wealthy, retired to a very expensive zip code, and he was very stressed one day in a coaching conversation, and I said, boy, you seem really stressed, what's going on? And he said, well, I've just got this business deal going on, and you know, there's a lot riding on it. I said, what exactly? He said, $11 million. I said, oh, you could stand to lose $11 million? And he said, no, if this deal goes south, I'll only make $11 million. Right? So that really, he wasn't being sarcastic, that was his problem for the day, and I want you to entertain the possibility that you have problems that other people in the world would love to have. Right? You're like, oh, really? The line's too long at Starbucks? I can't get a latte today? This stinks. I got to go to first period class, or whatever it is. Right? We all have problems that our brain paints as problems that other brains would see as absolute opportunities. I was working with a woman, 45 years old, diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. She was 3 months into this diagnosis, and they had said that it has metastasized. It is not responding to chemotherapy. We're going to discontinue. And that's when I met her. And she said, best thing that's ever happened to me. She said, I've learned more about love and what really matters to me in life than I think I could have any other way. And I would love to have a much longer life, but I would have so regretted never knowing this. All I'm saying is, your brain can tell you that making $11 million is a problem, and having terminal cancer is an opportunity. I was sitting next to a young man who had been accepted to his 5 top choice schools. They were flying back from Denver, totally stressed. I said, well, is financial aid an issue? No, my parents can pay for any of them. My 5 top choice schools, I got into all of them. It's like someone laying out 5 automobiles and saying, choose one, and you saying, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Jeez. Yeah, that's the way our brain works. It tells stories about problems and opportunities. So do this. This is fun. You've got a way that you do it. Your squirrel brain instantly interlocked your fingers. You didn't have to think about it. You didn't have to make a plan. Now do it one differently. Just move them off by 1. How's that feel? That's not right. That's not me. Right? Try this. Fold your arms. Now, notice which one's on top, and now put the other one on top. I love this because some people don't know how. Right? Are these my arms? What is happening? Yeah, so much of your behavior is guided by what feels comfortable. And once you're aware of that, you have more choices. When you get out of the habitual avoidance of discomfort and pursuit of comfort, you can actually see what you're capable of. Because comfortable with is not the same as capable of. They're two different things. And boy, do we want our students to know that. Great, okay, and then finally, the last concept I really want to hit you with here is that we're always practicing. Right now, right here, as you're sitting here in this room, you are practicing something. Your brain is paying attention to what you're doing, and while you sleep tonight, it will build pathways. These are human brain cells, live human brain cells in an enriched environment. Time-lapse videography. Your brain is a busy place. Cells are migrating, connecting, disconnecting. This is all going on mostly while you sleep. It's why sleep is so critical. But it's all based on what you did during the day. It assumes that what you did during the day was good for your survival. So it's rewiring to get better at it. So when we contract and contract and contract, that becomes more a reflex. When we stop several times a day, what's important? That becomes our reflex over time. Decisions, time decisions. I will show you this. Okay, this is my favorite football club. This is Barcelona Football Club. And they decided about 20 years ago that they were going to focus on one particular skill, which was getting rid of the ball as quickly as possible, moving the ball off their feet. So they play this game called rondos in practice, where two players are chasing the ball, everyone else is just trying to get rid of it as quickly as they can. And they're really good at it. In fact, they transformed the modern game of soccer with this drill. Now, every club, youth club in the world practices this to some degree, but they practice it a lot. And what I want to show you is 45 seconds of them playing in a game. And they're in the, you're about to see, they're in the purple, I mean the blue and red. The team they're playing, Real Madrid, actually has one more player on the field than they do.
Whoa.
You'll never know. So you notice your brain's also predicting the future all the time. So whatever we practice, we get better at, whether we intend to or not. And practice looks, sorry to do this to you, that's terrible, but practice looks like these two things. It looks like training. We set aside time to juggle, right? And so we get good at it, right? And then, like this happens, right? And we drop a ball. What I do next is practice, right? Blaming myself, right? Or blaming someone else, seriously? You again? Right? Yeah. Giving up and walking away, that's a practice. Picking up, beginning again, right? Tightening down over the course of the day, becoming self-defensive and self-protective, that's a practice. Opening up, breathing, feeling your feet on the ground, noticing what's going on inside you, listening. These are all practices. How we respond to the environment is every bit as much shaping our brain as the time that we set aside to work on something like math problems or juggling or tennis. So how do we get more balance in our lives? We practice. We don't wait for circumstances. We don't wait for what shows up. Oh, when vacation comes, right? The weekend, right? That we're waiting for these things, these external things. Those things don't build skill. Practice builds skill. And focus matters. What do you return your attention to? Is it the present? Is it the person in front of you? Is it your mission? So it's not just about bringing your attention someplace, it's choosing artfully and skillfully where you bring your attention, how you use your attention. And it's a skill, and we can get really good at it. And the way that we have taught attention for hundreds of years in this part of the world is by telling people to pay attention. And so what little kids learn early on is if I make eye contact, he stops telling me to pay attention. So I can think about whatever I want as long as I'm looking at him. But if I look away, oh, no, right? And so what we think of as attention, actually, we haven't been taught how to pay attention. We don't teach kids how to pay attention, how to use their attention skillfully. One of the first questions that I teach teachers is just this simple, who's thinking about something other than what we're talking about right now? And just normalizing that. Your attention wanders, notice that. And the more you notice that, you can start to make a distinction between a wandering attention and a focused attention. Wandering, focused. And that moment where you realize it's wandering and you bring it back and you find a little bit of balance, that's the moment. That's the practice. It's not keeping it from wandering, it's noticing when it does.